Good day, everyone. Today we will be examining one of the most influential ethical theories shaping governance, policy making, and administrative decision making: utilitarianism. In public administration, we are constantly confronted with questions such as: should limited funds we are constantly confronted with ethical questions or dilemmas in governance and policy making. Should we use the limited funds to go to infrastructure or to social welfare? Should we impose strict lockdowns during pandemic? Or should government subsidize fuel prices and invest in renewable energy? So behind these decisions lies a central ethical question: what action produces the greatest benefit for the greatest number? That question captures the essence of utilitarian ethics. Let us examine and understand the nature of utilitarian ethics. So utilitarian ethics is a consequentialist ethics. This means that the morality of an action depends on its outcome and not intentions or rules. The action is morally right if it maximizes overall happiness or utility. The classical formulation comes from Jeremy Bentham, who argued that nature has placed humanity under the governance of two masters. These are pleasure and pain. Thus, the actions are right if they produce pleasure and wrong if they promote pain. These are the four features of utilitarianism. 1. Consequentialism, which focuses on results and not the intentions. 2. Maximization, which seeks the greatest net benefit. Impartiality, which means that everyone's happiness counts equally. And aggregation, or that the social welfare is the sum of individual utilities. For public administrators, this translates into policy analysis, cost-benefit studies, and impact assessment. We go now to the evolution of utilitarian theory. We start with Jeremy Bentham. Jeremy Bentham is the father of utilitarianism. In the 18th and 19th century, he proposed that all pleasure are equal in kind, and that moral decision making can be calculated. So he introduced the idea of hedonic calculus, which will be discussed later on. But in his time, Jeremy Bentham influenced reforms in the penal institution, prison system, and democratic governance in his country. Next is John Stuart Mill, who refined utilitarianism as introduced by Bentham. He argued that not all pleasures are equal. There are higher pleasures, which may include intellectual and moral pleasures, and lower pleasures, which are physical. And he stated in his famous quote that it is better to be a human dissatisfied than a pig that is satisfied. For public administration, this suggests that not all benefits are purely economic. Education, civic participation, cultural development may produce higher form of well-being. Rule utilitarianism, on the other hand, had been introduced by John Austin and the later thinkers, while Bentham focused on evaluating individual acts. Later thinkers developed rule utilitarianism, which is, instead of evaluating each act separately, We follow rules that generally maximize utility. So for example, asking whether lying in this case will produce a result, we ask whether a society that allows lying will produce overall happiness. This distinction becomes important in governance. In the modern developments in the 20th century, philosophers like Peter Singer expanded utilitarianism globally, applying it to poverty, animal rights, and global justice. So in public policy, utilitarian logic influenced welfare economics, cost-benefit analysis, public choice theory, and evidence-based governance, just as what we have now, PBB, computation, performance-based benefits, upon which the granting of bonuses of our public employees is based. We proceed now to the different types of utilitarianism. So in this presentation, there are 4, but there may be more. So, utilitarianism is that which evaluates individual act. So, each individual act is assessed, but it may be flexible, this kind of utilitarianism, but it is unstable. So, there is a risk that we may justify morally troubling acts if they maximize happiness, such as destroying nature to promote benefits, such as in mining. Rule utilitarianism follows rules that promote overall welfare. This is more predictable and consistent with institutional governance. So we follow those rules. And then in the preference utilitarianism, the maximization of satisfaction of individual preferences is focused on. It is not just pleasure, but to satisfy the preferences of people. So this is relevant in participatory governance and stakeholder consultation, wherein we determine the preference of constituents. And lastly, negative utilitarianism focused on minimizing suffering rather than maximizing pleasure. These may be relevant, for example, in disaster response and poverty alleviation, where we focus on addressing the problems of those who are affected and those who are marginalized. We go now to one of the more challenging topics in utilitarianism, which is Jeremy Bentham's hedonic calculus. So the hedonic calculus is a method for calculating pleasure and pain. So he suggested that each action's moral value could be assessed by evaluating the 7 criteria. So you already know the mnemonics for this: IDC, PFPE. IDC, PFPE. I, intensity. Intensity deals with how intense intensity deals with how intense or strong pleasure and pain that results from an act or decision. For example, a relaxing vacation might produce mild pleasure, while winning a large sum of money may produce intense happiness. D. Duration. How long will the pleasure or pain last? For example, a meal provides short-term pleasure, whereas receiving quality education might lead to lifelong satisfaction. Third is uncertainty. Certainty or uncertainty is how likely is that the pleasure or pain will result. Next is propinquity or remoteness. How soon will the pleasure or pain occur? For example, immediate pleasure like eating chocolates are more proximate or near, no? Or immediate, while rewards for physical fitness from exercise might be more remote. So, maghihintay tayo. But fecundity, on the other hand, is the likelihood that the action will be followed by sensations of the same kind. So, for example, pleasure will be followed by more pleasure and pain leading to more pain. So, for example, learning a new skill may lead to continuous benefits such as career advancement and increased self-esteem. This means pleasure leading to more pleasure. In contrast, more alcohol. This may result to long-term health issues. So we may experience pleasure, but it will eventually lead to pain. And then purity is the likelihood that the pleasure will not be followed by pain or vice versa. Like taking a walk in nature is pure pleasure without any associated negative consequences, while eating unhealthy food might lead to pleasure now, but pain later on when we experience sickness such as diabetes or fatty liver, etc. And lastly, extent, probably the most important aspect of utilitarianism is when we determine how many people are affected by the action. For example, a government policy reducing taxes might bring relief or convenience or happiness to millions of citizens, and this will affect more people, while helping a friend in need benefits only one person. So, let us proceed to some cases to apply the hedonic calculus. The first case is purchasing barangay vehicles as against establishing an ecological waste management and recovery facility. In this case, the barangay has 500,000 pesos at its disposal. So the question is, should the barangay council decide on investing on a second-hand barangay vehicle or establishing an ecological waste management and recovery facility? The pleasure and convenience that may be derived from purchasing the vehicle might be intense, but establishing an ecological waste management facility may provide happiness and benefit, which might be less intense but more sustainable. Duration. The joy of owning the vehicle might be short-lived, whereas people's wellness and environmental sustainability could last much longer. Certainty. The pleasure from purchasing the vehicle might be more highly certain for officials, but less certain for constituents. While on the other hand, establishing the waste facility is highly certain for constituents and less certain for officials, since they will have to be the ones to ensure the management and sustainability of such facility. Propinquity. The pleasure from buying the vehicle is immediate, while the benefit from establishing an ecological waste management facility is more remote and slowly felt by everyone. What about fecundity? The vehicle might bring short-term comfort and pleasure, but could lead to regret when the vehicle depreciates. Marami ng sira. So, in this case, pleasure is followed by pain. While establishing the waste facility could lead to ongoing peace of mind, the sense of health and well-being, which means that pleasure leads to more pleasure. Purity, the pleasure from from establishing the waste management facilities purer, and the extent is limited to vehicle users, while establishing an ecological waste management facility will benefit the whole barangay. That is useful. So we go now to another case, the case of implementing sugar tax. So we think of sugar tax as one addressing a health issue, because consumption of sugary products lead to health issues like diabetes and cancer even, and also obesity. So a sugar tax causes immediate low-intensity discomfort because of higher prices of commodities, but aims for long-term intense health benefits because this will reduce obesity and diabetes cases. The challenge lies in balancing immediate pain with remote, widespread future pleasures and ensuring the certainty of the improvement of health of the constituents. And here is another case, adoption of flexible working hours in your workplace. So the introduction of flexible working hours may bring immediate intense pleasure and improve work-life balance for employees, leading to higher retention and productivity. So potential disruption to collaboration is less intense and can be mitigated. So the policy affects all employees, indicating a large extent of impact. So we apply all the 7 dimensions of the hedonic calculus in the cases. I hope that you can do so in the exercise that will be given to you. The hedonic calculus in modern policy evaluation is very important. For example, in mass transport system, in assessing the mass transport system, we find that significant convenience, long-term benefit, and the promotion of economic growth will result from policy decision. Hedonic calculus may influence cost-benefit analysis in NEDA feasibility studies, and so it is a very basic philosophical model for modern public policy evaluation. And let's take a look at utilitarianism in public administration in the Philippines. So we have 4 examples here on this slide. The conditional cash transfer programs of the DSWD, the 4 Ps or the Pantawid Pamilyang, targets the poorest marginalized households to improve health and education. So in this case, we maximize welfare gains for vulnerable or marginalized population. The question becomes, does the aggregate or the overall social benefit exceeds the cost? How about the universal health care of the Department of Health? DOH implements the Universal Health Care Act. In applying the utilitarian analysis, it determines broader health coverage. It posits that broader health coverage increases national productivity, and preventive care reduces long-term system cost. So the extent criterion is massive, meaning there are many people benefiting from this program. Pandemic lockdowns is still relevant for us because time and again we experience the outbreak of some illnesses, although regionally this is true, but utilitarianism is very useful in these cases because we determine economic losses as against public health protection. So during the COVID era, you remember IATAP had to decide whether to restrict mobility in exchange for saving lives. And then lastly, infrastructure programs. The Build program reflected the utilitarian reasoning that the cost of this project will lead to long-term economic benefit for many people. So what are the strengths of utilitarianism in public administration? We focus on the practical, policy-oriented feature of utilitarianism. It is consistent with measurable outcomes. So there is always cost-benefit analysis to determine the result of actions, policies, and decisions. And then we have democratic, which features everyone's welfare counting equally. So there is no preference as to who will benefit, but the concern is for the greatest number, the greatest happiness for the greatest number. Next is it is flexible, or it adapts to changing conditions and information. And then it is compatible with economic analysis. As I said, the basis of cost-benefit analysis and performance matrix for many administrations. And then it promotes efficiency and encourages optimal allocation of scarce resources. It promotes efficiency in resource allocation. What are the weaknesses and criticisms of utilitarianism? We will focus on 5. One is called tyranny of the majority. Tyranny is a very strong word. Tyranny is a very strong word because in this case, utilitarianism may sacrifice the minority. The minority rights are overlooked when the greatest happiness for the greatest number is prioritized. Measurement problem. This is because it is difficult to measure happiness or pain. And then number 3, ignores justice and rights. So it may justify morally questionable actions, as I said, black sand mining. Eventually, it will result to erosion and destruction of property. Distribution blindness. It may increase, halimbawa, the productivity of government, but it may increase productivity, but it may overlook the negative impact on some sectors. And then the uncertainty of prediction, wherein outcomes are uncertain. It is hard to foresee what will happen. In the Philippines, it is critical in governance, especially in urban relocation, mining permits, infrastructure, displacement. What are the implications for public service programming and delivery? First, we have evidence-based governance, which wherein programs must first show measurable impact. For government programs to be considered good, they have to show the measurable impact. Benefit. Performance budgeting, wherein funds are allocated based on anticipated social returns. What will be expected from policies and programs. These are decided upon based on the criteria that the greatest happiness for the greatest numbers will be achieved. And then impact evaluation, wherein policy success is measured through overall welfare improvement. And then there's this ethical risk where administration must always watch out for how the minority will be affected and ensure human rights are protected nonetheless, that the government will still try to achieve fairness in its decisions. So, as future public administrators, first you will be faced with trade-offs. You have to decide and choose between efficiency as against equity, growth or benefit as against sustainability, security against liberty. But utilitarianism will offer a rational framework. It is a good model for cost-benefit approach and the welfare orientation model to decision making. It is also holistic and it should be balanced with the rules, the laws, and social justice principles. Because public administration is not merely about maximizing numbers. It's not about the greatest happiness at all times. It's about preserving human dignity. So in conclusion, we have to balance utilitarianism with justice. Utility and justice must go hand in hand. Utilitarianism is important in public administration because it is consistent with the modern governance tool of cost-benefit analysis or performance-based budgeting. It is also useful in economic planning. It shapes development policies, influences administrative discretion. However, the application of utilitarianism must require prudence and must safeguard the rights of the minority. There must be democratic accountability and there must be moral reflection so as to prevent the erosion of the moral in the Philippines. In the Philippine public sector, utilitarianism explains much of what the government is doing, budgeting and planning. Bottom line, ethical leadership requires balancing benefit with justice. And that's all. Thank you for listening.